Alrighty, y'all. Hello and welcome back to another driving differences video. It's exactly what this one's actually about, is on the ground experience, in this case an American who has been living in Europe for I believe 5 years. Her experience driving throughout Europe versus driving in the US over here. So now we've looked at some videos in this realm before, right? Different road rules and standards, and of course, differences between the cars and all that jazz. And I think this is really fun, especially to me. I'm a car guy. Driving is very important as an American, right? That's what we rely on. And so I always find it very fascinating to see the differences and just how different places do things. This is from a channel called The Petite American. It would be in the description down below, so you can watch this whole video uninterrupted and of course browse her channel. I think this should be a good one. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
Start with one of the more obvious ones, which is a manual versus automatic.
Yeah.
So about 80% of cars in France are manual.
That's amazing. Hearing that is amazing. I have a whole video on this, by the way. I will have it linked at the end. You got to check out if you missed it. Diving into the whole manual versus automatic, especially between Europe and the US. It was a great video. And if you don't already know, I'm a huge manual transmission fan. I wish they were more common here in the US. It's frightening how not common they are. Luckily, I do daily drive one, so.
Where it's only about
I'm one of the few
in the US, meaning 96%
Look at that difference.
of Americans, the majority, drive an automatic car.
She's right. Yeah, it does come out to around 95, 96%, somewhere in that percentile range. Our automatic here is, and for anyone watching in basically any European country, I'm sure that is mind-blowing to hear if you've never been over here.
And there are a couple reasons for this. So automatic cars tend to be bulkier and less fuel efficient, but gas is much cheaper in the US, where in Europe it's about 3 times more expensive. Also, automatic cars can cost about €1,000 more than manual cars in Europe. And then since Americans prefer the ease of automatic cars, that is what manufacturers produce. And there's even some companies that have stopped producing manual cars for the US market.
Yeah, I always allude to that in a lot of videos. I think in most countries to a point it's like that, but in the US, man, it's so corporate, right? It's just big corporations, big companies, and they're all about that bottom line, right? They gotta bring in every penny they can get. And they end up making cars. Over the years, cars have gotten so bland, right? They just make whatever they can crank out in high numbers, right? And whatever car they can make the cheapest. It's not really about what the customer wants. I think there's a lot of people who do want like more manual transmission cars in the US, but the manufacturers don't really care, right? They just want to make the cheap copy and paste car that can crank out, and if they're all automatics, it's just easier for them, I guess.
Cars parked on sidewalks. I think it's due to like the smaller size of the streets here in Europe and in France, and just like not wanting to be hit, so they try to park as far off the street as they can, so they end up parking on the sidewalk. Wow,
those cars are like literally almost the whole thing's on the sidewalk. Now it's like I always look at the sites, right? This is a pretty looking, obviously French town or whatever. That is weird. You could see this dotted line, like that's where they're supposed to park. Obviously they can't fit in there. I kind of get that they don't want to be sticking out in the road, right? They don't want to walk out and see their car smashed. I also realize most of the roads are a lot smaller in a typical, let's say, random French village versus a typical village in, New York or Illinois or California or whatever. So I get that our roads are bigger and stuff. We definitely, when you're in a tighter environment like this in the US, there's still room to pull off, right? And then there's still a huge sidewalk. So yeah, I don't really see people doing that here. So that is a major difference. And it's kind of a good one because I've never seen this in another video about driving between the two continents, right? Wow. Yeah, that's a little bit weird. I get why they would want to do that. Is that technically just the norm, or is that like allowed? Because yeah, you don't want them too far out in the street, and then if someone granted veers over a little bit and then sideswipes 3 or 4 parked cars, that would suck, right? Especially if that was a common occurrence. But then again, pedestrians want to have room on the footpath as well.
When I was actually looking for the car I wanted to buy here, I found the cutest, like, small little car, but I learned it's called a sans permis, which means without a driver's license.
What?
I was shocked. This does not exist in the US as far as I know. But these small cars can drive on the road and you don't need a license.
What the heck? How have I not seen these before? I know like a smart car and stuff like that. Mini Coopers, like the old ones, smart cars, like I know those are really small. But I think you definitely need a license for those. We have smart cars in the US. They're not very common, but we have them. And you definitely need a license. You need a license pretty much to drive anything on the road.
With that being said, they usually only go up to like 27 miles.
Those are hilarious. So I gotta look more into those.
Kilometers. They're more just for like putting around town. But they can also be more expensive since you don't need to pass the test for your driver's license.
What an interesting concept. Yeah, obviously they're very slow. It's not like they're super dangerous or anything. It's almost like a glorified golf cart. Like they're just barely faster than a golf cart. Obviously they're more complete looking. It still looks like an actual car. It's just very small. Because like depending on the state and county and stuff, like you can drive golf carts on the road here. You can drive, side by sides like those Polaris or like Can-Am, type things. You can drive like a lot of smaller vehicles on the road, but you still need a license, if that makes sense. That's a very interesting concept to me. Sounds pretty cool if you live in a really tight city environment and you don't need to drive a lot or far.
Traffic circles or roundabouts are everywhere in France and in Europe. It's estimated that France has about 20,000 to 50,000 roundabouts.
Wow.
Where the US, which is like 18 times bigger, we only have about 5,000.
Oh so my God.
There's a lot less traffic. Instead, you just have to yield.
So if we take, this is just France, by the way, just France versus the US, not all of Europe versus the US, just France. 20 to 50,000 around there. In that range versus 5,000 in the U.S., which is huge. More people, way bigger landmass. That's crazy how rare roundabouts are here. Funnily enough, there is a couple in pretty close proximity to me that, like, one of them I take almost every day if I go somewhere. And I really do like it. I've had videos before where I've said, I don't know why we don't do this more. I really like it. It just seems like, I don't know if it's the federal government or if it's just the American populace as a whole is just super stubborn, right? It's like a lot of things are just a certain way here and they don't change, or some things are like old-fashioned. It's very bizarre.
Let the car pass and then you merge on. They're pretty simple to understand.
They are.
They're quite efficient.
They're very efficient.
Much safer than stoplights. And then you save time from having to wait at a stoplight.
Yeah, if anyone knows me in my personal life, I hate stoplights. Like, there are certain parts of Illinois where you just go, and then, like, literally 8 seconds later, you're at a stoplight, and it's always red. And then you wait 2 minutes, and you go, and then literally 10 seconds of driving, and then another stoplight. Like, oh my God, it's so frustrating.
This next one is, there's, like, way less cops than radars. And I couldn't find like a good statistic, so this is kind of just more based off of my observation. But I see way more like speed cameras here compared to the US, where they're much more.
That's what I've heard.
Parked on the side of the road, like with.
So like cops don't really sit and take radar. That's actually, she's right. I haven't really heard that in any other videos as well. Like you don't see a cop, like she's showing these pictures. You don't see a cop with a radar gun hanging out the door of the car, or like even from in the car or whatever. And they're just sitting there all menacing, right? And you see the cop and you see everyone slow down. That is definitely a thing in the U.S. It does vary by region, state to state, all that jazz. I have to say, I don't know why. I see it a lot less recently than I did like when I was younger. Like when I'd say like 10 years ago, I used to see cops taking radar like almost every other day. Like when I was driving, it was just like a normal thing. And now I don't see it too often. I think the last time I saw a cop taking radar when I was driving was on the highway. It was an Illinois state trooper. And I think it was literally like 3 months ago or something. Like I don't see it as often as I used to. But yeah, we almost don't have any speed cameras in the places that I've ever been to. Only once you get into like deep Chicagoland, you'll see some suburbs that have speed cameras, but it's not very common.
Their speed gun that like watch over traffic. Not multitasking while driving.
Oh
this
god.
sounds so silly to state, but
Yeah.
Americans like will multitask while driving. I am parked, obviously, so I'm not multitasking.
Yeah, it's a scary thing what you'll witness here.
But they'll like eat or put on their makeup all while driving.
Or both while being on the phone.
But in France, especially with like a manual car, it's just not super common.
Yes.
And it's actually illegal to talk on the phone while driving in France, whereas only about half of US states.
Yeah, I'm glad she showed this. I was going to say you can talk on the phone almost everywhere here, but certain states restrict you from holding or touching your phone. So like, of course, I am in Illinois currently, and they're in the red, so that means you can only hands-free. You can use a Bluetooth on the car if your phone's connected, or some sort of mount where your phone is, out of your hands, and hopefully you can answer by voice and talk only. That's allowed, but you can't be handling your phone, and scrolling through stuff and all that jazz. I try to just stay safe. I don't like talking on the phone. I never text while I'm driving. Like, it's way too distracting. I feel completely unsafe doing it, so I just don't do it, regardless of the law, right? It's just not fun to me. And then, of course, like she said, manuals are more common in Europe, so you can't really do much while you're driving. And I daily drive a manual, so I can't do much either. I have to shift and steer and all that.
It's ban handheld phone use. Here's a few more rapid fire ones. In France, we drive in kilometers, not miles per hour.
Which I heard that your speedometers only are in kilometers. They don't show miles per hour also, which is kind of weird. I like how ours are, of course, prioritize miles per hour because that's what we use. But we also have the whole speedometer laid out in kilometers per hour as well underneath. They're just in smaller, numbers, but you can still see them. And then, of course, if you have a digital speedo, you can use both. You can set it to kilometers if you want. That is one metric measurement I'm very familiar with. I don't think that would be an adjustment for me because I'm used to seeing what speed I'm going in kilometers as well. I'm pretty sharp with them, almost like I am with, miles per hour.
There are more toll roads, which means the roads are nicer.
Well, it's good that toll roads actually pay for nicer roads. We have toll roads all over Illinois, and our roads are pretty much the worst.
And there's less potholes on the road. In the US, you can turn right on red, where in France you cannot. And
that's
overall,
true.
The cars are much smaller in France and in Europe compared to the US.
Wait, so not every other person is driving like a huge crew cab, long bed diesel truck to work? Yeah, the U.S. is still crazy. We just have so many cars, big and small, but lots of big cars, lots of big trucks. And yes, people will daily drive humongous vehicles here, even if they're not necessarily using it for like hauling stuff. People will daily drive like a huge crew cab, 7,000 pound truck to an office job. I don't know. It's America.
I thought of one more, and that would be the carte grise and the vignette verte. So for a while, I thought this was completely different from the US just because of the name, a gray card, but it is actually just proof of registration and the characteristics about the car. And it's a 3-fold piece of paper.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then there is the
That's more put together than where I live. Ours is just like a printed sheet, your registration, and then your insurance is separate. That's either on your phone or, it's like a little credit card sized thing. You got to keep, in your wallet or in your glove box.
And you get this little green square called vignette verte.
Now that's cool. You can have it right on your windshield. So it just they know. You don't even have to get it out. I actually like that. I don't know if any states do that here. I know some states do registration on the windshield. Mine doesn't, but I know some states do. But insurance on the windshield, so that way you don't even have to worry about proving you have insurance. It's just there. That's kind of cool. I've never heard of that here.
And it goes at the bottom right side of your windshield. And this is for if you're ever not at your vehicle when the police are patrolling, they can see that you do have car insurance. I think it's also useful across Europe, like entering different countries too.
That's pretty cool.
Apparently in April 2024, it won't be mandatory anymore. So
what, the windshield sticker or insurance? Look at this old Citroën.
So those are some things I noticed. Si vous êtes français, est-ce que vous avez déjà conduit dans les autres pays? Est-ce que vous avez remarqué d'autres choses dans les autres pays? Et vous pensez quoi de ce que je viens de dire?
I'm sure driving within different countries in Europe is, of course, many differences as well. And that's why I'm super fascinated to try and learn slowly, you know, things, differences even between those different countries. But of course, driving in any European country as a whole is probably going to be a lot different than driving here in the U.S. I'm going to cut it there. There is more to this video, and, you know, this will be linked down there, of course. Make sure to check her out. That was a fun one. This was a good one because there was a lot of differences that we haven't seen in other videos, right? We've done videos similar to this in the past. It's been a long time, but she covered ones that I hadn't really thought about before. So that was pretty cool. I mean, there were some familiar ones, of course, like the manual versus automatic. I just can't believe that like 80% of cars are manuals throughout different European countries, and only 3 or 4% of cars here in the US are manuals. It's unreal. I pose a question to you guys, so if there's not so many cops taking radar, but rather there is police, you know, speed cameras everywhere, right? Like, how common really are they? I'm sure that ranges, right, between regions, states within countries, different countries, right? I'm sure that varies. And in places where there's a lot of speed cameras, how do they work? Like, do they get people all the time? Like, if you're, you know, accidentally, because I think everyone knows that sometimes you can accidentally go over the speed limit, and it's not like you're a bad person, right? Like, everyone speeds sometimes, right? It's not always on purpose. You know, you can have different terrain and the car speeds up. Not everyone has cruise control or uses cruise control. Like, it's very easy to speed by a few numbers, right? So how does that work with speed cameras? Like, how strict are they? And are people getting speeding tickets like all the time in places with a lot of speed cameras? I don't know if you would like to just kind of weigh in on that and tell me a bit about that. I would appreciate it. But yeah, tell me what you thought of this. I really appreciate you guys watching. These are really fun. So I love all the driving and car videos, especially lifestyle differences. I think they're always fascinating. But anyway, that's going to be it for this one. I hope to see you in the next one. That being said, y'all, my name is Ian. You're watching IWrocker. Until next time, catch you later.